So the first approach that we learned about was screencasts and tapping into students' preference for visual and auditory content and learning through screencasts. Now let's talk about an auditory-only approach in podcasts. When using podcast in your courses, you generally have two choices. The first one is to use already made podcasts. This is really a time saver and it's really efficient use of your time. And there are a ton of commercially available high quality podcasts by experts in our field out there and on almost every topic you can even imagine. Most of them are free. Just do a Google search for podcasts on a certain topic in your course and a bunch should pop up for you to choose from. I regularly find podcasts on the topics I teach in all of my literacy courses and I assign them to students. For example, this summer my grad class is learning all about the science of teaching reading, and I found a podcast that is a series of all the different topics in the science of teaching reading, and I assign a different one each week. Your second choice is to make your own podcast. And it is fun to make your own podcast on a topic in your course. You can customize it. You can guide the students in their thinking. It does take a lot of time to do this and a little bit more work, but it's well worth it. You can make podcasts in lieu of lectures or in addition to lectures. You could tell stories. You can contextualize and summarize the textbook or the reading for the week or whatever topic you're talking about. The students generally love when the professors make the podcasts. So why should we even use podcasts in our courses? Well, podcasts are easy and accessible. Our students are busy and they can listen to these podcasts using their computers, their laptops, or their phones, and they can do it whenever or wherever it makes sense. In their car, on their way to and from work or school, while they're folding laundry, or on their morning walk. My students have generally been very positive about the podcast because they say that it fits into their busy lifestyles. Podcasts appeal to those who have more patience for listening than for reading, and we know a lot of our students don't read, but this really helps get them motivated and involved in the content, and it's especially good for our dyslexic learners or our English learners. Podcasts convey authenticity and vulnerability that helps create a sense of community with the students, especially if you're making your own podcasts. It can make abstract concepts feel relevant through storytelling. It can humanize the material and pique students' interest, which can often propel them through rigorous or complex material. It can help them build empathy through the power of the human voice. It can really work in any course or in any discipline. The research shows that it increases student motivation, and it does connect students with real-world issues beyond the classroom. And a lot of times these are very relevant and up-to-date information on topics that we are covering in our courses. So I'm going to go over two ways that you can make your own podcast. There are actually a bunch of different approaches, but I'm just going to go over two methods. Approach number one is to create your podcast in Canvas Studio by creating a screencast, and not a screencast where you show videos or graphics, but you'll only show like a title slide, no face, no content, only the audio. And I like this approach because Canvas Studio will then caption the podcast for you, and you don't have to worry about getting a transcript or anything. And students don't necessarily have to watch it. They can still just listen to it in Canvas or on their phones. Approach number two is to download an inexpensive app on your phone or tablet like Just Press Record. It's $4.99 and it's super easy. I just press the button and I can pause it so I don't have to talk for 10 minutes straight. I can pause in the middle of it, collect my thoughts, continue my podcast. And you can upload the podcast to Canvas Studio and then request the captions. And there is a trick to getting Studio to find your audio files, and I'll show you that. So first I'm going to show you an example of a podcast that I made on my phone using the app Just Press Record and then uploaded to Canvas. All right, so my podcast is listed in my read and listen portion of my course. I used my phone, the Just Press Record app, to record this podcast for my students one week on vocabulary. It automatically, the app made a transcript for it, but if you use a script, you can also upload your script. But it created a transcript for it, and students would just push play. So I associated this podcast with 10 points in my course, and I could go to this insights down here and actually see if my students listened to the podcast this week and assign points based on that. Another way to make a podcast, like I mentioned, is to do it actually in Canvas Studio and do a screen record, but only have a title slide. So if I were to push play on this, this is only audio that my students could listen to. Welcome to week 2. This week, we are actually going to start learning about some of the more popular learning theories and how they apply to the literacy classroom. Students could just listen to it, and Canvas Studio automatically captioned. I can also do insights to see if my students are listening to my podcasts. So one more thing to note, if you do want to add a podcast from your computer, you will click Browse Files. And down here, instead of custom files, you need to put all files. And in that case, it will find your podcasts on your computer, and you can upload them to Canvas Studio, and it will automatically caption your podcast for you. Now, I want to highlight 11 ways to use podcasts in your HyFlex course. And while I've used some of these ideas, I cannot take full credit for this. I actually got these ideas from a podcast that I listened to by Barbie Honeycutt. She does a series called Lecture Breakers, which is a way to have engaging lectures in the higher ed classroom. And if you aren't already listening to the Lecture Breakers podcast as a college professor, I highly encourage you to listen to those. And also the Teaching in Higher Ed podcast by Bonnie Stahoviak. Both of those are great for learning about things in your courses. So anyway, I'm going to let you pause your video and read some of these. And I just want to highlight a couple of them. You can use a podcast episode as a supplement or an additional resource for reading a reading assignment, or you can actually give your students a choice. Do you want to read or do you want to listen to the podcast? And we know that choice really motivates our students. So I'm going to let you pause right here and read the first 4 ideas for using podcasts in your HyFlex course. Here are 3 more ways to use podcasts in your HyFlex course, and one of my favorite ways is number 6. I often have students comment within Canvas Studio on questions, confusions, points of reflection in the podcast that they're listening to, and it's really interesting for them to read their classmates' comments. Here are the last 4 ways to use podcasts in your classroom. And I want to show or highlight this last one where you can actually have your students create a podcast series. You can put students in groups and then allow them to choose a topic or assign topics to them, give them resources for creating podcasts, and then have them create a variety of podcast episodes for each other based on your course content. So there's an overview on how to use podcasts in your HyFlex course. Please let me know if you have any questions. I would be happy to help you.